It's important for us to understand some of the signs that might be seen when someone is engaged in financial fraud. Now, many of those signs, again, aren't going to be detectable by you as an outsider. But what we're going to find out is that some of these signs could be discovered through court records or through other publicly available sources of information. Some of the signs of fraud on a personal level may come to us via news reports or through chatter on the internet. There are situational pressures that may lead to fraud, which include personal financial problems, such as high debts, bankruptcy, child support obligations, spousal support obligations, or investment losses. Family or relationship struggles, particularly those that involve money, may be a motivator for fraud. Instability or emotional trauma in someone's personal life could lead to fraud. A significant illness, which could lead to time out of the workforce or substantial medical bills or both, could be an indicator of fraud. As well as addictions such as alcohol addiction, drugs, or more commonly these days, gambling. A criminal background may point to someone's likelihood for dishonesty, but it also may create difficulties in that person obtaining and sustaining employment. Chronic legal problems, which can be both expensive and time-consuming, could be something that could push a person towards fraud. And infidelity is a red flag of fraud. Infidelity involves dishonesty, and it requires funds that are concealed from one's spouse. Therefore, we have seen that fraud may be more likely to be committed by an employee who is engaged in an extramarital affair. What are some of the characteristics or behaviors that we might see in people who are involved in financial fraud? Personal or behavioral red flags that might indicate fraud include a lifestyle that's exceeding the known income, or possibly an obvious change in someone's lifestyle. Financial difficulties, unusually close associations with customers or vendors, having a wheeler-dealer type of personality. This is someone who is always making a deal of some sorts, often in a dishonest way. And often they're proud of their dishonesty and their ability to make those deals happen. Excessive gambling or use of alcohol or drugs. Perceived inequities or unfairness at work. Because what we find is that employees who are unhappy or who feel that things are unfair may be more likely to turn to fraud to even things out. Someone who is overly protective of their work, their responsibilities, and their documents might be engaged in a fraud scheme. They're unwilling to share their duties, they're unwilling to share information, and that might be because they're trying to cover something up. Someone who has a chronic dissatisfaction with work or their personal life may be more likely to turn to fraud to fulfill some need. Also, an attitude with a resentment of superiors may be a red flag. Someone who has an unusual desire for personal gain may be motivated to engage in fraud. And that could as well be tied into a weak personal code of ethics. Someone who has a lower ethical boundary may be more likely to engage in fraud. People who are frequent rule breakers or who have repeated attempts to beat the system are at greater risk of committing fraud. When we see a change in someone's work habits, we become concerned. Someone who starts coming in very early or maybe staying very late, in a way that looks like they're attempting to be alone at the workplace. Someone who is reluctant to take vacation time or be absent for more than a day or two at a time could be engaged in a fraud scheme. They don't want to be away from the office because they don't want their fraud scheme to be uncovered. People who rationalize unethical behavior are more likely to engage in fraud schemes. And people who have changes in their behavior patterns are concerning.